to order. Welcome to meeting number 130, the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. Before we resume the meeting, I'd remind all in-person participants to read the best practices guidelines and the cards on the table. These measures are in place to protect the health and safety of all participants. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format, and all witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, April 16, 2024, the committee is resuming its study of the Competition Act and air travel in northern, rural, and remote communities in Canada. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses, all of whom are joining us online today. From Goose Bay Airport Corporation, we have Mr. Rex Goody, Chief Executive Officer. Welcome. From the Northwest Company, we have Michael Beaulieu, Vice President, Canadian Store Operations. And from the town of Happy Valley, Goose Bay, which is by far my favorite name of any community in the country, we have Mr. George Andrews, Mayor. Welcome to you. Appearing for the second hour, we have from Central Mountain Air, Douglas McCrae, President, Perimeter Aviation, Michael Pyle, and from Summit Air, Miles Kane. Witnesses joining us online, I have two pieces of paper here, one red and one yellow. Yellow gives you the 30-second warning to let you know that your time is running out, and the red means that unfortunately if you don't stop talking I will have to cut you off. I do not like to do it as I have a high amount of respect for each and every one of you. We will begin with opening remarks from Goose Bay Airport Corporation, and for that I will turn the floor over to you, Mr. Goody. The floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir. Mr. Goody, my apologies. I think you're on mute, sir. Gowdy. We'll let you start again, Mr. Gowdy, and we'll start the clock at 0. Oh, is he gone? Did we lose him? See, I didn't pronounce his name correctly, and he decided he was out. Okay. While we figure out the connection issues with Mr. Gowdy, is we'll turn the floor over to you, Mr. Beaulieu. The floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to appear today. My name is Mike Beaulieu. I'm the Vice President of the Northwest Company's Canadian Store Operations. I'm joining you today from a back office in our store in Iqaluit, where I am participating in the Nunavut Roundtable for Poverty Reduction this week. The Northwest Company is a retailer operating in underserved communities across Canada, the South Pacific, the Caribbean, and the United States. Our operations in Canada are predominantly in the north, although not exclusively. Today, I will focus solely on our operations in the Canadian North. The North is a special place for me. It's where I started my career, where I met my wife, and where my family still live. I have lived in the territorial and provincial North, and I know the realities of the people who must navigate the region's unique challenges every day. So when I talk about our northern operations, this is very real for me. Our ability to serve these communities means serving my loved ones too. Transportation is a critical part of food availability and food prices in the North. Our stores rely on air freight, sea barges, ice roads, rail lines, facing logistical challenges that do not exist in southern Canada or in most of the world. Many of these challenges have been exacerbated by climate change and are all the more difficult due to the current state of northern infrastructure. We recently learned that, yet again, barges supplying the Mackenzie River will be canceled. The Hay River community, which was devastated by wildfires last year, and the communities in the Satu region will be particularly hard hit. We are again trying to find new routes to supply communities throughout the Northwest Territories with essential food and other goods, which we may need to do through air cargo services. While Nutrition North Canada has been flexible in working with us to offset these costs to our customers, the program is not a solution on its own. We need to do more to strengthen our supply chains and lower the cost of transportation in the North. Each year, with growing frequency, our road, rail, and air shipments are canceled or delayed due to floods, forest fires, or other reasons. Disruptions mean more food spoil while sitting on runways. This can mean communities face shortages of healthy foods or critical hygiene goods. It's bad for everyone. Air freight is expensive, but it's often the most reliable way to get goods to communities. Nonetheless, melting permafrost and prolonged wet seasons mean our shipments are often delayed because runways are out of service for extended periods of time. In the north, we often experience severe difficulties with our air deliveries due to weather, which is both severe and, due to the lack of weather reporting services, make it even more difficult for airlines to plan local conditions. Additionally, the lack of local de-icing services results in many flights never being attempted. The scarcity of paved runways restricts aircraft size and capacity, and labor shortages and other factors mean our shipments are often delayed or canceled. These transport disruptions, in turn, create cost pressures. There's limited competition for air freight in the north. As you are aware, many northern communities are small and lack airport infrastructure like hangars or unloading equipment. Conditions are not favorable for competition, and so we have few options. While we negotiate the lowest rates we can, the same high operating costs impact all carriers that keep rates high. Even if there were more competition, realities on the ground would likely mean cargo rates would continue to be high. Lowering operating costs and conditions that favor larger, more efficient aircraft are needed to effect change. I want to note, however, that there are other challenges once freight arrives in communities, including local delivery issues from the plane to the store and infrastructure shortages. While I recognize this study is about airlines, it's important to take the entire supply network into account so we can lower prices for our communities. I believe there's ample room to work together for the benefit of our northern communities. Of note, in recent emergency events, like last year's forest fires in Quebec and the Northwest Territories, we observed that we had access to information on the ground, technical knowledge, and that governments could benefit from. The airlines did too. Together, with the government, we can help Canada with logistics to help communities when they are in need. We also observed the challenges across the northern supply chain caused by labor shortages. The North requires significant attention and investment. We cannot lose sight of the importance of the people in the region. We are first and foremost a business about people, providing essential lifelines to communities. The Northwest Company wishes to be the government's partner to support northern communities and northerners, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beaulieu. We'll now go to Mr. Andrews, joining us by video conference. The floor is yours. Sir, you have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. We thank you for the invitation to appear before you today to discuss the Competition Act and air travel in northern and rural and remote communities of Canada. It is a huge issue in my part of the world. My name is George Andrews, and I'm the mayor of a beautiful community in northern and remote rural Canada, and that's the community of Happy Valley Goose Bay. It's located in central Labrador. We're a community of approximately 8,000 people. Nearly 50% of our residents identify as Indigenous. Our town grew around the establishment of Five Wing Goose Bay, the airfields that during the World War II, and is now a diverse, vibrant, and welcoming community. While we boast many amenities that are the envy of towns of our comparable size, it is unfortunately our remoteness that requires these facilities or services to entice workers and workforces to live in a remote area. For my residents, air travel is essential. It's an essential service to access things like healthcare, educational opportunities, but also to build business connections and economic development. The extreme cost of airfare, limited route options or availability, and the unreliability of one carrier servicing Happy Valley Goose Bay are deterrents for people who call this place home and want to work and live in this beautiful town. Seniors and others who have limited incomes often cannot afford to travel costs to attend specialist appointments that are only 1,600 kilometers away to St. John's. We also suffer delays and cancellations of flights cause travelers to miss medical appointments, business meetings, or time with family when an urgent situation arises. Business and leisure travel incur additional costs for meals, accommodations, and limited flight options, and delays to destinations outside the province result in poor connections to the rest of the world. The Goose Bay Airport Corporation, which you'll hear from in a little bit, our local airport authority, reported that from May the 1st to August the 11th, 2024, a period of just 103 days, 54%, that's 54% of the 110 flights were delayed by 30 minutes or more. Places tremendous stress and strain, financial stress and strain on travelers. As a municipality, we encourage business opportunities and economic development in our region. More choices of destinations, flight times, affordable fares are vital to our investment and expansion of the commerce and opportunities and current business opportunities within our community, within Labrador, within our region. My town council recently met with the Goose Bay Airport Corporation to hear what it's been doing to address the concerns raised by residents and visitors regarding the affordability and reliability of air travel to our community of Happy Valley Goose Bay. The Goose Bay Airport Corporation shared that they have been advocating to have these issues addressed by communicating with provincial government officials, our single provider of service, Provincial Airlines, and Air Canada, operated by Provincial Airlines. They engaged an independent aviation consultant to conduct a market assessment, and we are working with the local Chamber of Commerce as well as a group of our friends in Labrador West, also concerned with the same issues of affordable and reliable air transportation to make air service development their number one priority. Additionally, GBAC, or our Airport Corporation, has submitted a brief to the Standing Committee of Transport, Infrastructure and Communities regarding the Competition Act and the air travel in northern, rural, and rural communities, it is also appearing as a witness to this honorable committee today. The fare analysis conducted by InterVistas, shared to the town report, showed the airfares at Happy Valley Goose Bay's airport have increased at an average of 33.1% in 2024 over 2019 fares, whereas the national average is only 9.2%. So we're left questioning why. Maybe, is it because our development with fly-in, fly-out operations? We don't know. Our neighbors in Wabush, with their neighbors to the west in Western Labrador, have seen an increase of 47.3% increase, again, over the national average of 9.2%. We believe that the lack of competition accounts for a substantial increase impacting our residents. Labradorians have long had a local saying reference to cost of goods and service, referred to a little more in Labrador. But sometimes, and lately, it's a lot more. And I'll just give you an example. To fly, I've just priced today, actually, an Air Canada flight from Goose Bay to St. John's, Newfoundland. Total cost $15.53 at the flex rate, which is your seat and your bag. On Provincial Airlines, that same flight to St. John's, $1,281. If I turn around, I'm going to Costa Rica at the end of October, I'm paying less than cost within my own province. So there are severe issues. Our hope is that the Standing Committee will recognize air travel as an essential service for residents of Labrador and northern communities and make recommendations to develop or reframe programs and strategies that will reduce the cost to our residents. I again thank you for the opportunity to allow me to speak, and I'm pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We very much appreciate having you here with us. Next, we'll go once again to Mr. Gowdy. Mr. Gowdy, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, sir. Mr. Gowdy, unfortunately, we still can't hear you. Could we kindly ask you, sir, to unplug your microphone and plug it back in to see if that makes a difference? No, he's still there, but he turned his video off.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you for doing that, sir. We appreciate it. We very much want to hear from you.
Oh, my. Okay, well, thank you once again, and members of the committee. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge I'm joining you today from Happy Valley Goose Bay on the traditional territory of the Inuit. My name is Rex Gowdy, and I'm the CEO of the Goose Bay Airport Corporation. The Goose Bay Airport is an important economic driver and serves as a transportation hub for the region. Labrador is characterized by a vast geography, rich resources, and sparse populations. It has a population of about 26,000, 60% of which are indigenous, spread over 6,000 kilometers of coastline and 294,000 kilometers of landmass in 26 communities. 8 of those communities are not connected by road. The remaining communities that are connected by 1,100 kilometer stretch of paved highway. Even though many communities are accessible by road, all the communities in Labrador are remote. For communities in Labrador, air travel is not a luxury. It is an essential part of our everyday lives. In recent years, we have seen a steady increase in flight costs, a continual reduction in choice, and a network that is not reliable. Air travel is an essential service, not connecting communities, facilitating economic development, and ensuring access to health care and education. Despite its significance, the air travel market in the Labrador region, like many regions across the north, is predominantly served by one carrier. The one carrier connecting Labrador to the rest of the province and beyond is Provincial Airlines. Service from Central Labrador to remote communities along the north and south coast is provided by Air Borealis, a subsidiary of PAL, in partnership with two Labrador Indigenous groups. In 2021, Air Canada ceased operations at the Wabash Airport and in Goose Bay in 2023. In preparation, as noted by the Mayor, we commissioned a brief to be done by InterVistas, which did a fair analysis on six airports across Canada. The airports, I won't go too much into the study, but the airports included were Goose Bay, Wabash, Nain, Coojawak, Iqaluit, and Rankin Inlet. And basically, as the Mayor noted, the increase for the Canadian airports was 9.2% versus 34.2% for all northern airports. And while we understand that the cost of operating in northern regions is more expensive, we find it hard to justify or support such huge increases that were noted in the fare analysis. For better context, I will just include the return cost of an airfare from one of our most remote communities to give you a sense of how cost prohibitive and impactful it is for those living in communities not connected by road. The average return price from Nain to Goose Bay is $1,245. And a return trip from Nain to St. John's, where most medical services are provided, is $2,497. The lack of competition in air travel not only affects individual passengers, but also has broader economic and social repercussions. Businesses looking to invest or expand in Labrador are discouraged by the high cost of travel and the lack of choice. Competitive airfares and choice are crucial factors in attracting and retaining professionals and allowing the regions to fully capitalize on its resource potential. In an ideal world, the market would make the necessary adjustments. The northern environment is much more complex, and market forces don't really work like they do in the south. To address these critical challenges, we request that the committee recognize that air travel in the north is an essential service and ask that you recommend programs and policies that will foster more equitable access for communities in remote northern regions. GBAC recommends that committees consider the following suggestions to make air travel more affordable and reliable. The first is to look at best practices in other jurisdictions that view air travel as an essential service and provide traveler subsidies for residents and businesses in the north. The second is that special consideration be given to communities not connected by road. There are many communities across Canada's north, including 8 in Labrador, that are not connected by road, and special consideration should be given to introducing a user subsidy and infrastructure support programs for those communities that recognize the challenges are even more pronounced in those communities. Thirdly, we suggest that all policies and regulations be reviewed through a northern lens to ensure that regulations and policies better reflect the unique and challenging environment of carriers operating in the north. And our final suggestion for consideration is that a dedicated infrastructure program be developed for the north to facilitate better service and attract entrants and make it more attractive and less costly for existing carriers. In conclusion, we encourage the Standing Committee on Transport, Communities and Infrastructure to deem air travel as an essential service for northern regions and make recommendations to restructure Canada's airline industry that will foster a more equitable access. This will give their residents and businesses affordable and reliable access to vital services and better position the north to fully capitalize on its immense and untapped resource development potential. Thank you for your attention. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gowdy. We'll start a line of questioning today with Mr. Muse. Mr. Muse, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of the witnesses that have joined us today and making time for that. Let me start with Mr. Mr. Beaulieu from the Northwest Company. And I know that your perspective is with regard to the Canadian operations, particularly in the north, but I'm wondering, since you mentioned at the offset some of the other jurisdictions that the Northwest Company operates in, if you could speak about the comparison, say, between rural or parts of Alaska with parts of the Canadian North, because I mean we have northern communities on both sides of that border, and any differences in terms of regulatory burden, tax and cost burden on each side of that border that may impact obviously air cargo, which is essential to your business.
Well, thank you for that question. I'm not an expert on our Alaska operations. However, I am aware that their bypass mail system for healthy, nutritious foods is quite different than what exists in Canada. It has some benefit in the sense that cargo is tendered to whatever airline has the capacity to take the cargo. So it has a tendency to optimize use of any available aircraft going to any of the qualifying communities. So there is, to some degree, some benefit in speed of delivery in that model. I also know in Alaska, I believe they don't have the same user pay system. So the use of airports isn't burdened in the same way on the air carriers as it is in Canada. And I think that's probably the extent of the value I could provide to answering your question.
Thank you for that. And I think you've identified a few areas of cost differential between the system in Canada, which is federally regulated, and some of the costs and fees and taxes here versus, recognizing it's not entirely your area of expertise in Alaska. So you spoke about, of course, the high operating costs of air freight, which is an increasingly important aspect of your business and the most reliable. And of course, everyone spoke about the fact that that's an essential lifeline for the North. And I think you have agreement here, and we've certainly heard that echoed as a theme throughout this study. And so when we look at the fares that were provided as examples from the airport in Goose Bay, with their submission to this committee, it's quite striking. I mean, between 2019 and 2024 were the comparisons, and recognizing a lack of competition, yes. There's an average in the six northern airports that are attached to this grid of 34% fare increase compared to 9% overall at Canadian airports. So recognizing that obviously costs are amortized against perhaps a larger passenger base or freight base in other parts of the country, what has been the impact of escalating carbon tax costs, other taxes, fees that are an additional impediment to what is already a high operating cost environment?
And sorry, that question was for me again. Yes.
For you, and then I think we'll go to the mayor of Goose Bay.
Great. So we've seen similar compounding impacts of air cargo costs in our freight rates that for delivery of goods to our stores. Similar to what's been reported with air passenger travel costs, there's definitely a compounding impact that occurs the further north you go. Carbon tax, I think right now makes up about 13% of our fuel surcharge component of our cargo contracts. It definitely plays a role in higher food prices. It has had one of many compounding impacts, but so has changes in pilot duty time and hours and regulations, reducing the amount of same flights and distance of flights that the same pilot crew can cover. I think there's been, between fuel, pilot duty time, and things like carbon tax accumulating over the last 4 years in particular, we've seen higher rates of inflation than I've seen in the 30-year career that I've had working in the North.
To the mayor of Goose Bay, because we just heard about the 13% increase in food prices as a result of the carbon tax, but also you spoke in your written submission to the committee and in your testimony about the regulatory barriers, flight duty time being one of them. you know, when you talk about, as all witnesses have, how essential a lifeline air travel is to the north, not just to the communities that are there, but to attracting talent to the communities and labor, which is important, but also the future economic potential. Can you speak a bit more about how adding these additional regulatory burdens, adding these additional fees, costs, and taxes is really shooting ourselves in the foot in terms of the growth potential?
Yes, I think you know, from my community's perspective, my region's perspective, I mean, we've been enjoying some development, whether it be through mining or other projects. The challenge that we have is that the increase, and anytime, you know, for instance, from a regulatory perspective, I'll speak to that just quickly, and, you know, go to the duty times. Unfortunately, you know, we don't have a lot of opportunities to fly in, fly out. We do have two carriers, I guess, technically, but Air Canada doesn't fly. They've chosen PAL to operate their contract. So when you're sitting in Halifax on the daily flight that happens, and it's a 10 o'clock in the evening sort of departure, and you know, you're sitting watching your cell phone, waiting for the ding, because you know that there's going to be a delay, or that a flight's going to be canceled because of either duty time or, you know, some other reason. But most times it's the duty side, or crew unavailability is the one. So that, and all of a sudden, on a very expensive trip already, that adds another $200 or $300 from a taxi to a hotel. So the travel side is, you know, it's difficult. Yes, we are connected by road, but it's a 15-hour drive to Baie-Comeau. It's a ferry and several hours, you know, tens of hours, 10 or 12 hours to drive to St. John's. So that's difficult. So anytime you put an additional cost to a fare, whether it be, you know, the NAV Canada fees or tax fees or security fees, when they just all add up. And then on top of that, we seem to be nickel and dimed lately with baggage cost increase and you know, other seat selection fees and things like that. So that really adds up to a fare that's, you know, just not reachable for most people. And that's an impairment. So when you're up here, your family's in the rest of Canada, it's becoming very difficult for people to entice people to come up with that as an impediment, the cost of travel. It's really disheartening.
Detailed analysis with the chart of average fare increases. That's quite instructive and informative for this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muse, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next, I have the pleasure of turning the floor over to Ms. Yvonne Jones. Good to have you at committee. The floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to acknowledge Mayor Andrews and Mr. Gowdy from the wonderful riding of Labrador, who've joined us today at committee, and to thank them for their presentations, and also to Mr. Bulow from the North West Company, and to thank you as well for your presentation. I think for all of us who live in the North, we see air services as an essential service. It's essential not just to communities that are isolated and remote, but to communities that are partially isolated in terms of their access to the outside world. And whenever you have a service that is essential, obviously it has to be affordable and available to people. And this has been the issue not just in Labrador, but across many northern regions in Canada in the last number of years. It could be for a number of reasons, and I guess that's what we're exploring here. One of it could be the merger of a number of airlines. It could be the shortage of personnel and pilots. But what we do know is that we need to make some changes if this service is actually going to do what it's intended to do, and that is support people in northern and rural regions. So my questions, I guess, are going to be focused towards that. My colleague who asked the questions about Alaska, one of the things that Alaska has that I know my riding doesn't have in Labrador and most northern and Arctic regions in Canada is competitive airlines. And that has been one of the drawbacks. There's no doubt about that. But today I can book a flight to the Arctic of Iceland cheaper than I can book a ticket to the Arctic of Canada. I can go to Iceland almost any week cheaper than I can go to my riding. And that is a fundamental problem. Mr. Gowdy outlined what some of those costs are. So I'd like to ask a couple of questions to our guests today. One is, what do you see as the role of government to ensure that there's a more competitive market and more affordable rates for consumers in northern and remote areas of Canada, but areas that need this essential service? I'll start with Mr. Gowdy.
Apologies, Mr. Gowdy, you're on mute once again, sir.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Floor is yours.
Oh, my. Okay, thank you so much. And thank you, MP Jones, for the question. And I give that some thought in terms of how we could foster competition. And I think in some cases, the airlines are right. There are some regulations that impact on connectivity in regional remote and more remote areas. And that's why I've suggested that we look at some of those regulations through a northern lens. And some examples there would be the duty time and the airline passenger protection rights that could have some negative impacts on attracting regional airlines. Beyond that, I'm not sure how much I can add in terms of, and I'll leave it to some of the other panelists to add to that question.
Mayor Andrews, would you like to address that, or Mr.
Yes, thank
Below?
you, MP Jones. And you know, there's a bunch of things that come to mind, exactly what can be done. But I think it was mentioned before that the issues that happen in northern and rural Canada need to have a northern and rural lens. It needs to come from information come from you know, the lived experience instead of sitting around a bureaucratic table in some other larger cities in the country. Fostering competition is critical, whether that be through you know, opportunities for funding, for infrastructure development, the subsidy side of things, especially where communities are, you know, without a road connection or without another means. You know, I look back at years ago when Newfoundland joined Confederation, we talked about ferries, and ferry was invoked in because that was the way to travel. Well, it's many years later, and now it's airfare. You know, and some people can't travel to critical medical emergency places or doctors because of the cost of air travel. The other thing for me is that maybe, you know, for those that can travel, maybe there's something that can be done in terms of the northern residency deductions, increasing, offer, you know, the tax incentive or the tax return, I guess, to include more than just the one or two trips, or it could be larger amounts, which would, you know, return money back to travelers. That's just some things that come to mind very quickly. But I mean, the biggest thing for me is that that northern and rural lens needs to be applied here, because you know, even though, like I say, my community, we are connected by road, we do have winter. That road closes, you know, 15 hours drive to an airport. And again, I'll go back. I'm going to Costa Rica at the end of the month with my daughter. It's cheaper for me to go to Costa Rica, just airfare, Costa Rica, than it is to travel to my own province. There's something seriously wrong with that picture.
Do I have any time left, Chair?
Unfortunately not, Ms. Jones. You're at 6 minutes, 2 seconds.
Okay.
Merci beaucoup. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Barcelou-Duval.
Thank you very much. And now we shall hear from Mr. Barcelou-Duval. You have the floor, sir. 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to our witnesses for being with us here today. I had the luck of being able to go to your province, Newfoundland and Labrador, a little while ago when we went to Canadian ports here in this committee. I greatly appreciated my visit. But that said, let me get to my questions.
Thank you for pointing that out, Mayor Andrews. We'll make sure that translation is functioning properly.
Testing into English.
What we'll do is we'll give the time back to Monsieur Barcelou-Duval. Donc, vous pouvez recommencer, puis la parole est à vous.
You can start again. You have the floor, sir. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, Honorable Mayor, I was saying that I've had the chance to visit Terre-Neuve, Labrador. While in the committee, we were viewing ports. We didn't go to Goose Bay, we went to St. John's, but I wanted to mention that I greatly appreciated my visit there. We weren't there long enough. It was a wonderful discovery of a wonderful place, the sort of place that we in Quebec don't often visit. Let me begin with a question for Mr. Goody. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. Gowdy, all right, thank you. We have heard other witnesses here in this committee involved in airport management, notably during our last meeting, who told us that one of the main issues they had found was that the airport needed to operate user payer, the same way that the Canadian system works across the nation. It can be very useful, especially in large cities, but in the regions, given that there aren't many flights, it, becomes difficult to recover the costs because you've got these set costs that have to be spread over all the flights, and this is it requires quite a volume of flights to really absorb these fees, and really it's the consumer, the person booking the flights, that winds up paying the airport fees. From your point of view now, do you think that the current approach, which is based on how many people fly, and in the small airports, again, not many people fly, yet you have these high fees, bigger airports can spread that over more people buying the flights. Do you think the system is working for you?
The situation in Goose Bay is a bit unique in the case that the airfield itself is owned and operated by D&D. So many of the costs that we would have at the airport in Goose Bay with respect to the airfield will be covered. So we wouldn't have just the same cost model. Having said that, I know some of my colleagues with airports across Atlantic Canada do have some issues with lack of traffic. And I think you had a witness that presented from Gander, Mr. Red Wright, and they're having issues in terms of the amount of traffic to recoup or to be able to operate in a sustainable way. So there are, while it's not a big issue for Goose Bay, given the fact that many of the costs, higher costs with respect to the airfield, will be covered by D&D. And that reflects in our rates. The rates in Goose Bay are, in terms of what we charge in terms of user fees, passenger facility fees, would be much less than they are in other regions. And that's indicative or reflective of the fact that we had D&D who covers a large percentage of those costs.
Merci beaucoup pour.
Thank you very much for that answer. This leads me to a second question of a more general nature about airlines in general. A number of witnesses also came to tell us here in the committee that sometimes what they would see would be small companies attempting to offer a new service to a destination who were building, investing, and once the market was really up and running, then a larger company, a national carrier, for example, let's say Air Canada, who would turn up and would say, oh, there seems to be a market here, I will just take over. And given that the market isn't large enough to allow for two carriers, the small carrier is kind of sunk. And then Air Canada decides down the road not to maintain high quality service, at least the same level of quality that was offered by the small carrier, and also charges higher fees, given that there's less competition. So some people have suggested that we might have a floor price to sell tickets below a certain price. That would be unloyal competition, so that it couldn't be used to bring down a smaller competitor. Do you think this sort of policy would be applicable to your region? Does that make any sense to you?
Again, I find that Goose Bay is in a unique situation. We haven't found ourselves in that situation. We had a situation where we did have two airlines, but like a lot of airlines across the north, they consolidated, and we now have one airline. And I guess that translated into higher costs. Some of my colleagues at other airports across Atlantic Canada, I think, have suffered or have been impacted by the issue that you raised, and whether I'm not sure if I'm in a position, but like whether floor prices would be one avenue to address that, I'm not quite sure. But there needs to be some policies put in place that encourage better regional connectivity in northern regions. And I'll speak to Labrador. I just like when we look at Goose Bay and we look at Wabush, we have, decent facilities in terms of airport facilities, and we have an incredible rotational workforce. And one would think that would translate into better airfares.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. Barcel-Duval. Next, we have Mr. Backrack. Mr. Backrack, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for contributing to this study. And really interesting to hear that the circumstances facing residents of Newfoundland and Labrador are very similar to the circumstances facing rural and remote communities on the other side of the country. Certainly communities in Northwest BC face the same pressures that our witnesses have described. And I think over the course of this study, we've been grappling with some of these different policy approaches to get at this issue of cost and lack of competition in small communities. I'm especially interested in these programs that have been implemented in Quebec, in the United States, that directly subsidize air service for people in more remote or rural areas. But I was noting the Nunavut Legislative Assembly looked in 2015, there was a report on protecting rural air transit, and that idea of direct subsidy programs got panned pretty thoroughly, both by airlines themselves and by others, as being overly expensive and open to abuse, misuse, and often serve political ambitions. There were some pretty strong words given when it came to those kinds of direct subsidies, favoring the approach of investing in infrastructure and driving down costs for airlines. And I guess the question we've been wrestling with, if you drive down costs for airlines, it's difficult to ensure that those savings are passed on to the passengers themselves. And so I wonder if all of our witnesses could just talk about this tension between directly subsidizing the passengers to ensure that they get the best possible price and they get affordable air service, and making it less expensive for airlines to operate in the hope that that will reduce barriers to entry for new airlines. What's the right mix of those kinds of policies? And maybe we can start with Mayor Andrews, and then we'll go around the virtual table.
Sure, thank you. I'm not so confident, and that based on many years of air travel, I'm not so confident that those type savings would be passed along if it was direct, bringing the cost down. excuse me, for the cost of airlines. And as in our particular circumstance here, our costs are maybe not as they're a bit different, I guess, than other airports across the region. But I do look at friends in Labrador West. They have the opportunity. The Quebec government subsidizes a flight to and from Quebec from Labrador West. It costs $500 return, which is amazing, because it gives you the opportunity then to for a much lesser cost to get out to an airport that you may be able to continue the rest of your travel with a very affordable, very a decent price. Myself personally, I think I would support that type of approach, as opposed to passing savings to carriers with the hope and intent that on the trusting side that they would return that savings to travelers. That doesn't seem to be I don't seem to have that great lot of hope in that working very well for the end user.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. I wonder if perhaps Mr. Gowdy could offer his thoughts on that same question.
No, I'll answer in a similar vein, and when we look at the program that Quebec offers, my quick look at it, it seems to be getting a favorable response and provides low-cost travel to people in remote regions, and the subsidy goes directly to, or the benefit goes directly to the traveler. And which is why I suggested that government look at all subsidy programs with a view to looking at some of the best aspects that could be considered. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you would want to put a program in place that translates into savings to the traveling public. And there are programs that we offer in northern regions that don't necessarily put in place, food by mail being one of them, where it can be argued that despite all the subsidies, that the savings don't translate, or that the subsidies don't translate into benefits to the end consumer. So my suggestion would be that any consideration for subsidies be done in a way that the consumer or the traveler would realize the benefit.
And Mr. Gowdy, the subsidy programs, well, the only subsidy program we see in Canada is the one that Quebec has to directly reduce airfares for rural residents. Would a program like that be better managed by the federal government so that all Canadians in rural and northern Canada can have access to those affordability measures, or is this something that each province and territory should contemplate based on their unique conditions?
Good question.
That's a question for us to ask ourselves.
From an airport corporation, or really at the end of the day, from a consumer perspective, there's one taxpayer, and whether it comes from the province or from the federal government, the benefit will accrue. Ultimately, if the benefit accrues to the consumer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bachrach. We'll start our second round with Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And with apologies to the witnesses, I do have two hopefully brief but important administrative issues I just wanted to take care of. If the chair would be kind enough to give us the schedule for the next 3 meetings, say, that would be terrific.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. So I believe we have the minister appearing on Thursday with officials. Then we have the week break. I believe when we get back, we will be conducting the business of the McKinsey study. And then after that, we will be going to the Bloc Québécois for their study. And we invite Mr. Barcy-Duval to share with members, perhaps after the meeting, what that study will be on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then just one other quick administrative note. I'm just giving notice, not moving this motion, to be clear. Given that this year alone, the Liberal carbon tax has added $2 billion to trucking costs, according to the Canadian Trucking Alliance, and that this $2 billion is passed down to consumers, raising the cost of living and making heating and eating more expensive, the committee report to the House that the Liberal carbon tax has failed the transport industry. Thank you, and I'll go on my questions now, if that's...
Sure, you're just putting...
I'm just putting a notice. I'm not moving it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Lawrence.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And I am mindful a little bit of an old Ronald Reagan quote in listening to some of the testimony. And Mr. Reagan used to say, or President Reagan used to say, if a liberal sees something move, he taxes it. If it continues to move, she'll regulate it. And if it stops moving, they'll subsidize it. And so, mindful of that quote, before we embark on the idea of subsidies, should we not go ahead and slow down the amount of money that the federal government is taking from your northern communities through transportation and otherwise? I believe a Churchill quote was that if you're in a hole, if you want to get out, the first thing you need to do is stop digging. And so I would go to, first of all, to you, Mr. Beaulieu, is that correct? Beaulieu, Mr. Beaulieu, my apologies. How much does your company pay in carbon tax?
That's a great question, but I don't really have an answer for you in totality. We don't and have not created a mechanism to provide that degree of detail. It's something that I could ask to see if I could get back to the committee with at a future time.
Point of
Terrific, Mr.
clarification,
Beaulieu. We would appreciate that. Could you describe what the impact on your company would be, just anecdotally, is if in fact the carbon tax was quadrupled?
Well, from a retailer perspective, our transportation costs are embedded in our pricing in our stores. It's our northern community and the residents of our northern communities that would ultimately pay for those higher costs. Our cargo contracts, whether they're trucking or they're air, have there's a base rate, but there's also the fuel surcharge. And so we've noted that the fuel surcharges for every lane, whatever the mode of transport is, has been impacted by the carbon tax.
Thank you. So a quadrupling of the
Excuse me, Mr.
impact
Chair.
would be.
Just 1 second, Mr. Lawrence. I'm going to stop the time.
I don't want to take from Mr. Lawrence's time, but just for a point of clarification, the committee might want to look at areas where the carbon tax applies, and there are a lot of areas in the Arctic regions of Canada where it doesn't apply. So I'm not saying it doesn't necessarily apply to the Northwest Company in one way, shape, or form, but a lot of the carbon taxes don't apply in those regions.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Perhaps if you have more time to speak, or one of our other colleagues or another colleague can ask that question, but Mr. Lawrence does have the floor.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. And from another member, I might suggest that was inappropriate, but I know as a good East Coaster, it was an earnest clarification there. So, thank you for that. And I'm just going to go to you, Mr. Gowdy, with respect to one of the things. I'm relatively new to being the critic for transportation. One of the things that I found interesting is our fee structure and how it's kind of unique for airports. Could you tell me at your airport how much are charged by your airport on average per fare?
Per fare, we have the passenger facility fee, that's $20, which I would say is the cheapest in Atlantic Canada. Our airport terminal fees are competitive. I think $222 for a Q400. Our landing fees are cheap, again, for benefit from the fact that D&D operates the airfield, and our airport terminal fees. So in terms of fees from the Goose Bay Airport Corporation, we have arguably some of the cheapest fares in Atlantic Canada.
No, my question was not in any way to slight, I'm sure, which is the airport you operate. I'm just trying to get at the bottom of when I have consultations, and I'm sure I'm not the only members with the airport. The airlines blame the airports. The airports blame the airlines, and so on and so forth. And my question is legitimately trying to get what percentage of that is affected by airports. If we were to change the model, of course, Canada's model is unique. How much lift could we get from that? If you could speak to both your airport, but if you seem quite well educated on the topic, how much that could affect fares in general, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, no, good question. Like, there are a number of fees and fares, and the airlines would say that makes up, I think, 40% of the cost of airfares. I want to go back to the study that was done by Intervistas. That was base airfares and didn't include the fees and taxes that are charged outside of the base airfare. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but from the airport perspective, the fees that we charge are from a user perspective are a bit different for Goose Bay, given the fact that we're operated by D&D and they
Perfect.
cover the airfield.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you very much. It's great to spend some time with some good Northern and East Coasters, salt of the earth folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Lauzon. Monsieur Lauzon, la parole est à vous.
Mr. Lauzon, you have the floor, 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Beaulieu, Mr. Andrews, and Mr. Gowdy. Les questions vont être en français aujourd'hui.
My questions will be in French today. Let me begin with Mr. Beaulieu. You know, you are perhaps one of the only witnesses we've heard to have spoken about the air delivery issue of climate. Could you tell us, as of a few years, what climate change has done to impede delivery.
Thank you for your question. I think that from a climate change perspective, we've seen several years now of extreme wildfire activity across the country. We know that last year in particular, Northern Alberta, Northwest Territories, and Northern Quebec were significantly impacted by wildfires. So servicing all of Nunavut and the Uichi area of Quebec was impaired when the Billy Diamond Highway was closed intermittently for over a 1-month period, impacting the delivery of food for all northern residents or residents of northern Quebec and Nunavut and the Uichi, significantly at risk. We worked diligently to redesign our supply network through northern Ontario, and we're then flying goods across the bay to service those communities instead of through the La Grande airport. In northern Alberta, we lost a store to wildfire. It was small in comparison to the tragedy of the entire community. I believe there was over 80 homes burned in Fox Lake, Alberta. And there was significant disruption. The city of Yellowknife was evacuated. We've seen low water conditions on the Mackenzie River that's caused the cancellation of barges. We've seen erosion of foundations in some of our stores and having to invest now millions of dollars of infrastructure because of melting permafrost. And we've seen soft runways in places in northern Manitoba that have restricted the size of aircraft that are able to land. All of these things drive costs into the business and create hardship for our northern and remote communities and the folks who live there.
Wow, that's a long list. Pensez-vous vraiment qu'un gouvernement...
Do you think that a government, a responsible government, needs to deal with climate change, take real action to reduce the production of greenhouse gases and improve the situation?
I believe it's a real government has a role to play in positively making change.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Vous nous avez parlé de deux...
Mayor Andrews, you have brought up two important topics, discussions you've had in your area about reliability and how easy it is for people to pay for things. Could you tell us what your regional board, your Chamber of Commerce, what role they can play to help us make the right decisions? And what has their analysis been of the situation? Yes, thank you for the question, Mr. Lauzon. I'm able to speak French to some extent, but I may switch to English if necessary.
It's concern to everybody. The Chamber of Commerce and us, our council, have had conversations. You know, we're all trying to push the same way in terms of trying to receive the maximum benefit for our communities, our regions. Part of that is business development. The impediments in terms of business development are that cost of airfare. So if a company comes in, whether it's bringing their supplies in, bringing their staff in, sending out goods or products via air, it is the cost is huge. And when I look back and look at that the average increase for our airport was in excess of 30% since 2019, as opposed to some other ones, the national average of 9.2, that's concerning. So trying to push. So the chamber is working towards that. The reliability for us is critical. So I mean, if you have a person who comes from Western Canada or other part of Canada or other part of the world to come into my community, 54% of those 100 flights that came in the last number of days were late. Some were canceled, and it's you sit at the airport with anticipation.
Merci, on a atteint notre maximum. J'aimerais juste que vous...
Thank you. We hear that. I would just like you to provide your recommendations to the committee so that we could add this to the file. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lauzon. Mr. Berthelot-Duval, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I will speak to Mr. Andrews here in the second round of questions. Here's my question for you, sir. I think in your opening remarks you mentioned that airline transportation, airline travel in a region such as yours is really essential. And I think that MP from your area has said much the same thing. In Quebec, when we call something an essential service, it means that the state has to help support it. For example, we have hospitals, we have healthcare, we have schools, free schooling, and so on. These are thought to be essential services. And yes, there are some types of transportation that are free as well. But are you satisfied with the current level of state support to your regional airline system?
And as a community leader, I'll have to answer no. And the reason I say that is because I see people having to fundraise for the cost of travel to a medical appointment, to raise to make chicken dinners, turkey dinners, to try and get this for people. But on the other side, I see an opportunity where a province has upped and gone into the subsidy role in helping people travel between the provinces. So from my perspective, the level of service, I think it is critical. It's it is an essential service. When there is no road contact, it's 2024. We can't expect people to stay in our communities and do nothing, no economic development, no things like that. So I think that I think there is a role, a definite role, and I think that needs to be addressed. The essential side of things needs to be addressed by government.
Merci. Donc, si je comprends bien, vous seriez en faveur d'une...
So if I understand correctly, you would favor some sort of system that would allow for supporting economically local transport, air transport.
Say something that would put the savings to the actual end user and not to the companies, and hope that would relate down, finally come down to the user.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Berthelot-Duval.
Mr. Bachrach, floor is yours. 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe either Mr. Andrews or perhaps Mr. Gowdy had mentioned the new duty time rules as being one of the regulations that really impacts the costs that airlines face in the north. And, this idea that perhaps when we look through a northern lens, as Mayor Andrews mentioned, those rules don't make as much sense. But my understanding is that the duty time rules are based on safety and trying to ensure that we have well-rested pilots. Is there a way to look at the duty time rules through that northern lens without compromising safety? Or do you feel simply that the new rules go too far and place an unnecessary burden on the companies that are forced to pay extra pilots?
Well, I personally think there's nothing that trumps safety. Safety is critical and paramount. It puts an undue burden on the remaining staff that are left with the companies. So that's the more issue. So like I say, in terms of at 11 o'clock at night, I shouldn't get an email sitting in an airport in Halifax that duty times. That should already be done. And I put that onto the companies from a planning perspective. So at no point in time is safety a thing. For me, safety is paramount. It's that, the way that is managed, and that comes down to the companies and how they manage their staff.
And Mayor Andrews, we've talked a lot about the cost of air service for Northerners. I don't think any of our witnesses today have yet mentioned availability of flights. It's certainly an issue that's come up in my community and in northern British Columbia. Is the availability of flights also an issue, or the service levels that the airlines are providing, or is it mostly just the total cost?
No, absolutely. Availability plays a huge part. So when I received a phone call from the Air Canada representative saying they were pulling out of my community, and they assured me that competition, because there were still two providers, competition wouldn't be an issue, and that service and requirements couldn't be an issue. My first response was, well, Air Canada wasn't having a very successful rate in terms of the regular flights and availability. and now they're putting that burden into an arrangement with another company. So we're seeing now what the end result was with Air Canada, which was availability, frequent cancellations, repurposing aircraft to go to charter operations for fly in, fly out. So we're seeing that, we're living it, and it's costing us additional money because it costs us additional hotels, meals, and things like that when people are traveling.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bachrach, and I would like to thank all of our witnesses who have appeared thus far on behalf of all committee members for your witness testimony to this very important study. I ask that all witnesses log off now. I'm going to suspend colleagues for 2 minutes as we switch over to the second round of witnesses. The meeting is suspended. Order. Colleagues, I am pleased to welcome the second round of witnesses for the second slot, and we'll start with Central Mountain Air, Douglas McCrae, followed by from Perimeter Aviation, Michael Pyle. And from Summit Air, we have Miles Kane. So we'll start off with Mr. McCrae. Mr. McCrae, you have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, sir.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Douglas McCrae, President, Central Mountain Air. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Central Mountain Air is located in northern British Columbia, and for reference, we're considered a small airline as categorized by the Air Passenger Protection Regulations. At Central Mountain Air, our company purpose and values include providing a safe, affordable, seamless travel experience for all of our clients and communities that we serve. Next, simply I'll mention some points for consideration from our perspective that may contribute to reducing the cost of air travel in our region, as well as improve air service in Canada. We feel additional structured assistance for rural and remote communities is required to support air development and future operations. Construction of hard surface runways from current gravel surfaces and de-icing equipment availability are becoming standard items for consistent day-to-day operations. On the national front, we feel Canada can support and advance the development of sustainable aviation fuels and infrastructure. Policy and regulation dictate the way air carriers operate, and one size does not fit all. Baggage security regulations, cargo security, fatigue and duty, air passenger protection, and CTA charges need regular review and, where able, change for continuous improvement. In addition to the already high cost of operation, Canadian air carriers face a myriad of external taxes, visual and buried fees, including airport rent, AIS, PFCs, TSCs, GDS, NAV Canada fees, single supplier de-icing fees, to name a few. Again, a review and rejig required. Interline agreements allow a passenger to travel on multiple airlines on one travel itinerary instead of two or more. It simply allows a reduction with no duplication of fees and the ability to through-check luggage to a passenger's final destination. A more open interlining architecture amongst large and small carriers should be advanced, allowing fair pricing strategies, reduced airports fees, and more seamless travel experience for the traveler. In closing, despite its great size, Canada is one of the world's most sparsely populated countries. Air operations, we feel, are essential. Aside from the large mainline carriers, small carriers are able to contribute towards improved air services and fair pricing for Canadians. Certainly not limited to, but the points I've mentioned previously currently add to the incremental cost for the air traveler. The aviation industry requires financial and regulatory reform to set it on a new course for success. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCrae. Next, we'll go to Mr. Pyle. Mr. Pyle, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes for your opening remarks, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, honorable members of the committee, and thank you for your time today on this important topic. In my position as CEO of Exchange Income Corporation, otherwise known as EIC, I am here testifying on behalf of Perimeter Aviation and Bearskin Airlines, two of our aviation subsidiaries. More broadly, I lead a dedicated team of aviation professionals who manage vital air carriers throughout Canada, including our wholly owned airline brands of Comair, Perimeter Aviation, Bearskin, and PAL Airways. Wasaya Airways and Air Borealis are jointly owned with First Nations and Indigenous partners. Keewatin Air, Custom Helicopters, PAL Aerospace, and Carson Air provide air ambulance and specialty aviation services. Each of these air operators have significant track records and experience in providing critical services to remote, Northern, Indigenous, and First Nations communities. Together, our family of our operators accounts for over 325 years of experience and investment in Northern aviation. We know firsthand the challenges faced by Northern air operators are very different than our Southern counterparts. And we have learned that the quality of our service and investment in infrastructure is fundamental to our success. Consider the challenges of offering a commercial operation that can move only 4 or 6 passengers out of a community on a given day. Our fleet is diverse and highly customized to meet the demands of the environments where we fly, while we also operate within the limits of the infrastructure that supports the Northern aviation communities, accommodating all the needs of our communities we service. We've invested heavily in basic infrastructure that is needed at Northern airports. This is far beyond what would be typical for a traditional airlines to stabilize our operation and deliver better service. For instance, the need to build and maintain our own maintenance facilities, fuel farms, ground handling equipment in remote locations, provide staff housing, or develop our own storage facilities to keep goods at a regulated temperature until our customers can pick them up, are all examples of substantial capital investment EIC has made that our Southern cousins would never have to consider. The communities we serve are very thinly populated, small, and for the most part of the year can be accessed only by air. Depending on cargo, especially food, alongside passenger service to support sustainable service. Any disruption can disproportionately affect remote communities, raising costs and limiting access to essentials. To ensure our operation remains stable and sustainable for the long term, we've built a complex network that link multiple destinations, spreading volume and efficiencies across a network rather than just between 2 points. We tailor our operation and invest heavily in our product because we know that aviation is vital in the places we operate. Alternative access is limited or in some cases non-existent. Air services are crucial for delivering government services like healthcare, education, and public safety, while also being critical in linking the economic opportunity in the North. In that context, our airlines are more akin to public utilities, built on essential services and bonded to the communities we serve. This is a structure that has allowed our operators to weather market fluctuations. For instance, by partnering with governments and communities, EIC carriers were able to maintain our entire network during COVID, not abandoning a single destination during the pandemic. At the same time, the investments in Northern carriers must make to operate shifts the nature of competition. The North cannot sustain multiple providers providing overlapping services. Instead, we frequently see multiple providers bidding on long-term contracts for either government or private business, such as mining or natural resource development, that allow the certainty required to build the ecosystem we need to operate and recover our costs over a longer period of time. With reality in mind, we believe that healthy competition in Northern aviation should first seek to ensure consistent service, long-term investment, and the maintenance of critical infrastructure. Any policy focused on northern aviation must consider the unique challenges faced by operators and by communities. Southern solutions on regulations, competition, or encouraging sustainable investment cannot simply be copy-pasted into the north. Government has a critical role to play in addressing those challenges and finding solutions for sustainable northern aviation. Regulatory frameworks that consider the realities of northern operations or investments in infrastructure that stabilize the operating environment while reducing the cost to communities and our passengers would be welcomed by the industry. With that in mind, I again commend you for taking on this study and welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pyle. Mr. Kane, I want to confirm with you that you do have opening remarks, or would you like us to proceed with the first line of questioning?
No, I have some opening remarks. I didn't prepare formal speaking notes for the committee, but if that's okay, I can go ahead with some.
By all means, the floor is yours, sir. You have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Miles Kane. I'm the Senior Vice President of Operations for Summit Air. Summit Air is a wholly owned subsidiary of and a member of the Ledcor Group of companies. I have been involved in Arctic aviation for a period of 33 years. I've performed various roles. I've been an aviation mechanic. I've been an aviation pilot. I've held a variety of management roles over the past 20 years. My role at Summit is very much operational, and I'm based in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories. I'm also the vice president of the Northern Airline Transport Association, the executive committee. Those of you who are not aware, it's a membership group of over 24 Northern airlines. And we meet annually at our AGM and meet regularly with our regulator and various other government factions to forward our initiatives and interests in the Arctic. Summit Air as a business is a little bit different compared to the usual model of aviation carriers. We're a charter business. So we're not a scheduled carrier at all, but we support an important market for industry and investment in the north, in that we support oil and gas, mining, food retailers, government, private sector, and tourism are our primary clients. We also have a diverse fleet. We have over 25 aircraft now, 300 employees. And we have bases in the south, in Alberta, but our primary base is in Yellowknife. I welcome questions today kind of that fall into 3 different categories. First of all, I want to echo some of the comments of my predecessing speakers or witnesses in the essential nature of aviation in the north. My role in NADA has seen a lot of participation in providing comment and guidance to new government regulation. And we've seen some shocking disregard for this guidance from the subject matter experts on this jurisdiction who all operate safe airlines 24/7 in this area. We see new regulations coming down the pipe that have an even more dire impact on the Canadian North, the constituents and residents of the Canadian Arctic. That will see a further degradation of quality of living and increase in costs in these areas. So I welcome those. These are tied into airport infrastructure issues. Our airports are woefully behind the times in terms of capabilities, lighting, equipment, and then also welcome questions around the Competition Act and recent merger activities in the Canadian Arctic with several different carriers. So those are my opening remarks, and thank you for asking me to participate in this committee.
Mr. Kane, we'll begin our line of questioning today with Dr. Lewis. Dr. Lewis, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And I want to thank the witnesses for coming today. My first question is for Mr. McCree. You mentioned that sustainable aviation fuels and infrastructure was very important for the future of aviation. What do you specifically mean about sustainable infrastructure? How do you define that?
Sorry, sir, you are on mute. So we'll stop the clock here and ensure that you're given the appropriate time to respond.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, I just think as a whole, we shouldn't hold back on advancing or building the infrastructure. I believe it's an up and coming requirement for the future, for the environment, and just that we should give it our all to get involved in the production of same.
You also mentioned that CTA charges need regular review. Can you elaborate on what types of charges? Because you spoke about external taxes and buried fees, and so can you elaborate on and list the types of fees that your airline pays? For example, what are the airport fees that are added to the fare? What are the landing fees, the terminal fees, etc.?
Well, there's the common fee, which is the AIF, and if airports actually charge it as an AIF, it displays on the ticket. So, it's in full view of the person buying the ticket. There's lots of buried fees, a fee they call a passenger facility charge that doesn't show on the ticket, and airports charge that directly to the airline. So buried fees like that, don't show necessarily on the day-to-day or are in the view of the public.
Can you tell me what percentage of the fees do you make up the fare?
I cannot.
Okay.
At this point, I could figure it out and get it to you in the future, but at this point, no.
That would be helpful if you could undertake to do that. My next question is for Mr. McCain. Mr. McCain, you stated that you have a business, and it's a unique business that deals with charter, and you also stated that you work with the oil and gas and mining and food retailers. Now, we heard from earlier witnesses about the cost of living, and we heard about the crisis with the food crisis in the north. And we've also heard that the cost of transportation in the north is increasing at such an exponential rate that not even Nutrition North, a food program that was set up to deal with affordability of food in the north, can offset these inflationary costs. So do you have can you elaborate on how the costs, all of the hidden costs and the red tape in your industry has to be transferred to the food industry as outlined by a prior witness?
Okay. I'm assuming you're referring to me. It's Miles Kane. Is that the witness you'd like to answer the question?
Yes.
Okay. So as an airline, yes, we are a charter airline. So we have several contracts with food companies across the Arctic. And so any of our elevated costs must be passed on to our customers, who in turn pass on their elevated costs to their clients who are buying the groceries. There are many, many examples of how our increased costs have to be passed on. So one example is the carbon tax. Another example is the flight and duty regulation changes that were not actually based on any science, but were bearing a slavish devotion to adhering to EASA regulations, basically. EASA, of course, is a network that is largely connected by road, where foodstuffs are not regularly flown unless they're gourmet or shellfish or seafood. Whereas in our jurisdiction, Yellowknife is the end of the road, and there's 56 communities north of here that require all of their fresh foodstuffs to be flown in. So all of the, if you want to apply a number to the cost of the flight and duty regulations, I think most airlines had to increase their pilot workforce by 20%. I see a red card.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kane, and thank you, Dr. Lewis. Next, we'll go to Mr. Hanley. Mr. Hanley, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thanks to all three of you for this really interesting testimony. I want to start with Mr. McCrae. Mr. McCrae, you specifically bring up interline agreements, and this is certainly an area of interest, and actually was one of the key motivations for me to ask for this study to proceed, given the importance that it and the potential that it brings for northern carriers. And again, I'm going to just reflect Joe Sparling's testimony from May, the CEO of Air North, and how he described it. He said mandatory interline and code-share agreements would serve to level the playing field between small regional carriers and large network carriers by providing regional carriers with access to mainline networks and thus 100% of the market rather than just a portion of the market. And he reflected that this has already been achieved in other industries such as telecommunications and the railroad. There are parallels already. So I wondered if you could maybe reflect on how government can facilitate interline agreements. What do you see as the pathway?
I believe it needs a bit of a push at this point in time. It's certainly up to the discretion of both companies to enter into a interline agreement. I probably agree with Joe's comments that at the end of the day, it opens up the playing field, and certainly would allow the traveling public to, more or less see the world on one ticket rather than multiple travel itineraries with different airlines. If both players came to the party, and I think we would see a combination of the fare, which would be more pleasing to the passengers as well. Yes, that's what I suggest.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Mr. Pyle, does this apply to any of your companies? Is this an area of interest for you?
I don't think there's any downside to facilitating these processes, and we're in discussions on that on a regular basis. But in our business, most of what we're servicing are Indigenous and First Nations communities across the north. And 90% of those would be attending to a southern center, whether it be for medical appointments or shopping or those kinds of things. Very few of our passengers would follow through into like a tourist or vacation kind of travel. There are some who may travel, say, down from Rankin Inlet to Winnipeg and then across to Toronto for government meetings or those kinds of things. And in that case, it would be helpful. I think more in the convenience factor, than the absolute price factor, because they could check their luggage. They don't have to worry about if one flight's delayed, the other airline automatically looks after it. So there's definitely a benefit to it. I would agree with that. I don't think it's a huge part of our business, however.
Thank you. And just to continue with you, Mr. Pyle, I was curious that you mentioned the importance of partnerships, at least with some of the companies under your umbrella, with Indigenous companies. And I wondered if you could tell me a bit about what advantages that might bring, and how they may be facilitated or further facilitated.
We have different forms of agreements in different parts of the country. We have some areas in Labrador and Northwestern Ontario in particular where we actually own the airline with First Nations. And so we're the operator and they're an equity partner. In other places like Manitoba or Nunavut, we actually have community partnership agreements where we share some of the benefits of the airline service, whether it be providing free tickets to the community, economic development assistance on certain projects, bereavement charters, those kinds of things where we put money back into the communities we serve. In my business in particular, we're largely looking after Indigenous peoples. And so the opportunities to put money back in is huge. I'd like to point out one other one where we have tried to cultivate Indigenous pilots. We own a flight school in the Maritimes, and we tried to get Indigenous pilots to the flight school. They very struggled culturally being that far away from home. So in the last 2 years, we've opened up flight schools in 3 communities where we provide free pilot training to people in those communities in the hopes of developing First Nation pilots, A, to reduce the pilot shortage, but B, to provide pilots to the communities who understand the culture in those communities. And so I think as it relates to Northern Canada, the Indigenous part of the business is very important.
Thank you. I guess I don't really have time for another question yet. I'll hold on to that. 15 seconds, thanks.
Thank you, sir. Prochainement, nous avons M. Barcelou-Duval. À vous la parole. 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Oui. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci à nos témoins qui ont accepté d'être présents aujourd'hui. Je vais commencer mes questions avec M. Miles Kane de Summit Air. J'avais surtout une réaction à votre mot d'ouverture quand vous avez parlé, en fait, beaucoup de la question des relations entre les lignes aériennes et les fonctionnaires, ou du moins les gens qui élaborent les nouveaux règlements. Vos commentaires me faisaient penser beaucoup à ce que d'autres personnes ont eu au comité jusqu'à présent quand on a reçu des témoins. Beaucoup de lignes aériennes semblent nous dire que ils ont, en tout cas, à tout le moins, là, pour ce qui est des régions éloignées nordiques, qui ont l'impression que les décisions se prennent par des fonctionnaires à Ottawa, mais que eux autres, ils font simplement les subir et qu'on ne tient pas en compte leur réalité. Pourriez-vous peut-être nous expliquer, en fait, comment se passe cette relation-là? Quelle est la forme de dialogue? De quelle manière vous êtes consulté avant qu'Ottawa arrive avec des nouvelles réglementations qui vous impactent? Est-ce que c'est toujours quand il y a des nouvelles...
Switching channels, very sorry, interpreter's error. Testing, testing.
OK. Est-ce que ça fonctionne maintenant?
Are we working now? Yes. Yes, I'm terribly sorry. I think we have understood what's at issue. You have 5 minutes left, though. We'll start you at the top of the clock. Oh, look. So, look, Mr. Keynes, here's what I'd like to know. What can you tell us about the relationships, the conversations between you and people at Transport Canada?
Having any translation, but I didn't hear anything.
I don't get any either.
So what we're going to do, thank you for that, to our to start again with his preamble, please. We'll bring you back down to 0. And we'll let you start again, Mr. Barcelou-Duval. Donc, à vous la parole. Vous avez 6 minutes.
You have the floor, sir. You have 6 minutes. Very well. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thanks to our witnesses here with us today. Let me begin with a question to Mr. Miles Kane of Summit Air. In brief, what I was saying is that I have the impression that in your opening remarks, you were saying something similar to what we've heard from other airlines, to the effect that they have the impression, especially if they're from remote regions, they're from the north and they're small airlines, they have the impression that decisions are made in Ottawa without taking into account the situation in the north. So here's my question for you. How would you explain the relationships that you have with people at Transport Canada? Are there any discussions? Are there any compromises that are worked out? Just basically day to day, what's the relationship like?
Again, was I supposed to receive a translation of the question?
Il n'y a pas de traduction?
I could repeat it in English.
So there seems to be no interpretation. The witness is not hearing us.
Might be on the wrong channel.
Yeah, so Mr. Kane, I think what's happened, you haven't selected translation. There's a button to press that would automatically translate or provide you with the live translation feed that we have.
Where would that button be?
Perhaps I'll ask the clerk to guide you through that. Or perhaps the director of our audio video services here can help out. Congratulations on the promotion.
Hi, Mr. Kane. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see where it's written participants. To the right of that, there's a button where you have probably selected original audio. So if you click on that button, you'll be able to select English to hear.
Okay, I see how to do it.
Yeah.
I see how to do it now. I had it actually translating what you were saying into French, and I've got it figured out to do the opposite now. So
I apologize. Could you say that again? I can't find that on mine.
Colleagues, if it's okay for everybody, we'll suspend for 2 minutes to make sure that we've got all this sorted out, and we'll resume in 2 minutes. This meeting is suspended. Call this meeting back to order. Encore une fois, Monsieur Barcelou-Duval.
Once again, Mr. Barcelou-Duval, you have the floor. Very well. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us. I hope that things will go well this time. As I was saying to Mr. Kane, was that I have the impression that things he told us during his opening remarks mirror or certainly have a good deal in common with things we have heard from other witnesses who have come before us in the past to tell us about airlines in the regions, to the effect that it looks like decisions are made by civil servants in Ottawa who don't take into account their lived experience in the north and to impose a single system. So I'd like to know how you interact with Transport Canada.
yeah, that's precisely the concern. In my role in in my operational role, I've had a relationship with my region because Transport Canada is made up of a bunch of regions, and whichever region you operate in as an airline is the region you deal with on a operational level. But when it comes to policy, of course, it's in Ottawa. So I haven't had too much experience with Ottawa in my role at Summit, but in my role at NADA, I've had a significant amount of experience over the years, and there's been a marked shift of the relationship and the behavior of the regulator in the past, I would say, kind of 5 to 7 years, in that it seems like there's a dogged determination to implement new regulations and almost ignore the impact of that on northern constituents. And that's a bold statement, I realize, but I do feel strongly that that's the case. And it seems like the process of meeting with the operators and the subject matter experts is now a box checking exercise rather than one that is designed to pursue meaningful input that will drive sensible regulatory change. We know regulatory change is a requisite. We know that. Every industry has to change and modernize and get safer. But it shouldn't do that and leaving residents of Canada behind fiscally and from a health and safety perspective level. So I have a great relationship with Transport Canada. Operationally, I do. And, I feel like on the regulatory Ottawa side with my NADA role, it's a little more strained. But I feel like there's this dogged sense to just carry on with implementing these new regulatory changes, regardless of the impact of Northerners.
Donc,
So, are there any ways to share, any discussion groups between airlines and civil servants? Are there any compromises? Are there any discussions that lead to compromise, or is it just something that's imposed?
I mean, it's something that was imposed. We were consulted with as far as a process is concerned, but all of the vast majority of solutions we proposed as alternate means were turned down. And so, a lot of these have had dramatic impacts on Northerners. And the one I'm most particularly concerned about is the new approach ban regulations that are coming down that are going to have a significant impact on operational capability in the north for all air carriers.
Merci.
Thank you.
Mr. Bachrach, the floor is yours. 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses for making time for us. Apologies on behalf of the committee for the technical challenges. I'll direct my questions to Mr. McCrae. And Mr. McCrae, it's great to have you before the Transport Committee, fellow Smithereen, and someone whose company has provided, I know, Smithereen, it's our collective pronoun. We're very proud of it. Someone who has provided, through your company, some great service for Northern British Columbians. I know that you've provided both scheduled services and charter services, and I wonder if you could talk for a little bit about your experience trying to compete with larger carriers in smaller markets. As a small airline company, what have been some of the barriers that you faced? What have been some of the challenges in trying to offer Northern residents competitive airfares and the kind of service that you want to provide?
Sure, thank you. At the end of the day, I guess we're continuously looking for opportunities of where maybe service is limited or the frequency of the service is just not there. And, we feel the community can handle it. And we've made attempts on occasion of operating some scheduled service to certain communities, one being Smithers. But maybe sometimes, business-wise, our competitors don't like to see us playing in their sandbox. So At the end of the day, certainly the large air carrier brands and dominance, I would say, come into play, and they put the pressure on by changing fares or frequency, which we just don't have those pockets.
And Mr. McRae, do you feel that that's sort of the way of the world, or is there a way that the federal government could put its thumb on the scale in favor of smaller carriers? I talk to a lot of people in our region who would love to see small local companies providing service. That's something that they want to see emphasized. Is there a role for government in that, or is it, at the end of the day, it's just business?
Well, it is just business to some degree, but certainly an alignment of the interline agreements to open up the playing field and to some degree a little bit of policing maybe when it comes to changing frequency or changing fare levels, more or less on a predatory basis, I guess I'd say.
Thanks for that. Switching to the topic of interline agreements, we've had some interesting debate and testimony at committee from Mr. Sparling and others who are big advocates of interline agreements. Does CMA currently have any code shares with larger airlines?
We do, yes. Code share with Air Canada and interline agreements with both Air Canada and WestJet.
And, I believe what Mr. Sparling has been advocating for is a government mandate that would essentially require the larger airlines to provide those co-shares to smaller airlines. If such a mandate were put in place, would it help companies like yours reach larger markets and provide competitive pricing and service to, the residents, the people that you serve?
I think it would help. But at the end of the day, again, both parties need to agree on a more or less that level playing field and fair practices.
And you mentioned earlier, gravel surfaces and upgrades to gravel surfaces and de-icing infrastructure. Obviously, in smaller communities, these are issues that would improve access. In the area that you serve, what are some of the communities that you feel could use those kinds of upgrades?
From the gravel runway standpoint, it's a fairly small First Nations village that we go in to 2 or 3 days a week. And simply with the pilot experience and going forward with that type of experience, it and also simply damage to aircraft from the gravel runway, it would be an improvement for sure.
And we heard from some of our other witnesses about the duty time regulations and the impact that that's had. I think the one figure that was cited earlier was a 20% increase in pilot costs. Is that a similar experience for Central Mountain Air? And how have you had to manage those increased costs when it comes to duty time?
Well, we've certainly accommodated them. It creates a level playing field to some degree, the regs. But I certainly think they could be reviewed and at more or less provide for end of the duty period some sort of relaxation to get through the day.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Backrack. Colleagues, we have about 10 minutes left, so if it's okay, we'll do a lightning round of 2.5 minutes each. And we'll spread that around. We'll start with you, Mr. Viss. Mr. Viss, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Mr. Kane, you mentioned earlier that the flight and duty regulations led to a 20% increase in, I believe you said, staffing when they were implemented. Can you please clarify for this committee why those regulations caused such an increase and when those regulations came into effect?
The regulations came into effect January 1st, well, it depends. If you're an airline, it depends on your category of aircraft that you operated. So there was a split, so it was easier in the industry. But it was a requirement to hire more pilots. Basically, it limited the amount of duty that pilots could fly. In the north, our pilots often fly more seasonally. They fly more in the summertime than they do in the winter. But the new flight and duty regs ignore that. They basically take something that was a table that would fit on half a page. Those were the old flight and duty regulations, and turn it into an 11-page document. And that was the change. So it's all encompassing. It affects local nights rest. It affects basically taking a pilot from one jurisdiction in Canada and naturalizing him to a new base. It's very complex, and that's okay. The fact of the matter is we wanted something that would be right-sized for the North and make sense and also provide a higher level of safety. So 20% more crew, more flight crew in an environment that already there's a worldwide pilot shortage. There's
To clarify.
Unprecedented. Well, there's sorry, clarify the worldwide pilot shortage?
No, clarify what year the regulations came into effect.
Doug, feel free to jump in here, but for 705 Airlines, I think it was January 1st, 2022. Is that right, Doug?
I'll go with that answer. Sure.
Yeah, it's been 2 years, and it was January 1st, 2023 for the smaller air carriers with the smaller categories of aircraft.
Thank you.
Or less.
Thank you. Did these regulations lead to an improvement of safety in your operations? And
sorry, second part of the question. Go ahead.
No, please answer the first. That's fine.
I would say no. They've led to increased administration costs because the regulations are so complex now. It took us a while. It took a while for software to be invented that could manage them. We did not have in our database of safety, we're all required to have a database of safety incidents, proactive reports, and there was not any type of reduction of fatigue-based reporting post-implementation of duty regs. In fact, fatigue was never on Transport Canada's TSB watch list until very, very recently.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. Thank you, Mr. Viss. Next, we'll go to Mr. Hanley. Mr. Hanley, the floor is yours. 2.5 minutes, please.
Mr. Kane, you're still on the hot seat. I'll carry on actually the same theme.
Go for it. Yep.
And this is really about, I guess, safety. Sometimes safety is put forward as an absolute, and I think you and I might agree that safety is not always an absolute. It really involves a balancing of risks, and and certainly as applies to flight duty hours, and you've explained a little bit about how that plays out in the northern reality. A pilot times out due to a shortage of pilots. It might mean, say, a less experienced pilot in a more risky situation. So I think that understanding is important. Plus the pace of regulatory changes, and you alluded to this, like a lot has come at you in a short time. So I wondered whether maybe in the remaining minute and a half you could reflect on how this could be improved, even as you mentioned, you're facing actually new regulations coming down the pipeline. So what is the change that we could actually apply, like right now and in the coming months, to make it more realistic for northern operators?
I mean, I don't mean to make assumptions about our regulator, but it would seem to me that there's a mandate that is made within the regulatory body to make a regulation change. And when the consultation process used to be, let's talk to the SMEs in the industry and let's get their perspective. And then that consultation was taken to heart and considered, and changes to the proposed regulations were made. The regulator was also steeped in a great deal of operational experience across all regions and in Ottawa. So we've seen a decrease based on some cutbacks in Transport Canada. We've seen a decrease of skilled operational personnel actually working at Transport Canada, an influx of more of a political bend to driving regulatory change. So what we need to see, I think, as a country is a regulator that is driven to consult, not as a box ticking exercise, but consult to get it right across Canada from coast to coast and coast, including the north, because it's a very stark difference. Approach ban is coming out, and it's basically some Arctic communities, because of their lack of airport infrastructure of lighting and approaches, it's going to decrease their service remarkably in a big way, and I'm including medevac travel in that, food transportation in that. It's going to have a big effect. And with what we saw with flight and duty and the lack of meaningful consultation, we're all very scared as operators that this is going to march down the same path.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kane, and thank you, Mr. Hanley. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Barcelou-Duval. À vous la parole. 2 minutes.
Mr. Barcelou-Duval, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So let's continue with Mr. Kane. What you said leads me to think, I remember having had a conversation with an airline manager, a small airline, who said that they tended to keep their pilots for only 6 months before a larger airline would basically take them, and had no idea how he was going to keep his business going. The only solution was to reduce the number of flights because he was unable to provide enough pilots. All this to say, Mr. Kane, that I'd like to know, when it comes to applying regulations, of course we understand that everyone wants to ensure safety, but here's what I'd like to know. Is there some sort of vision or an understanding, some set of examples of small airlines and large airlines being treated differently, or are the same regulations applied across the board?
Similar regulations are applied. There is some lines in the sand. There's 3 different categories of airline in Canada. There's air taxi, which is small aircraft, less than 9 seats. There's commuter, 19 seats and less, and then there's airline, which is everything above. You know, the regulations in terms of what's required to fly an airplane are very similar for all 3 factions. As far as the example of that small airline that keeps their pilots for 6 months, yeah, that's a thing. That's real. I'm happy to say Summit Air is, I guess, probably one of the middle sharks. We're not the tiny fish at the bottom. That's small airline. So we get pilots from those really small airlines, but then ultimately Air Canada and WestJet and steal the pilots from us because pilots tend to chase bigger aircraft. And let's face it, a lot of our pilots come from the denser population centers of Canada, because that's just where the population comes from. So they want to return there. One of the initiatives we're undertaking is to promote, train, retain a pilot workforce, a northern pilot workforce, and a northern mechanic workforce. So anything that can be done at a political level, as far as incenting that, would be much appreciated. We feel like that's the solution to recruit and retain a workforce.
Merci beaucoup, Mr. Barcelou-Duval.
Thank you very much.
Backrack. Mr. Backrack, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm interested in this flight duty regulation issue because, you know, the federal government has the Transportation Safety Board, which is an arm's length organization that makes recommendations based on safety, and the board has identified fatigue as one of the key issues on the watch list. And I believe in 2018 it was expanded to the air sector. Certainly we've talked about it in the context of the rail sector a fair bit. And, you know, I guess my question is, to Mr. Kane, is if Transport Canada had done more extensive consultations, as you've indicated would have been preferable, what kind of approach would you have preferred that would achieve the same goal of stepping up safety without resulting in that 10 or 15-page document that you referenced earlier around the flight duty regulations?
Yeah, completely valid question. I please don't take this as a glib answer, but we provided that feedback like at least 6 or 7 times to our regulator. In a nutshell, we provided areas that were causing, like, let me give you an example. A pilot comes back from a duty mission, and because he or she is free from duty 1 minute after this hour, it requires a complete 4-hour extra reset the following day. So the regulations are rife with details like that. And we just proposed alternate means to kind of achieve fatigue balance and measure. And they were, a lot of them were summarily ignored. And we were kind of branded with, oh, these guys just don't want change, and they're just worried about the bottom line of their airline, which wasn't the case. We embraced wholeheartedly the requirement for change. I do want to say there's been some things on the TSB watch list for the better part of a decade that have still not been actioned. So as far as the timeline of items on the watch list, fatigue was a relatively short one. If you look at from when it actually first got added to the watch list, which was incidentally based off, it seems like a solitary event perpetuated by Air Canada in San Francisco, there wasn't a long history of this being an issue. But I don't want to get into that. I mean, what we want to say here, these regulations, this ship has sailed. What we're eager to address as an association, as operators, to make sure this same box checking exercise of consultation and lack of understanding the impact on the North does not occur with future regulatory change.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kane, and thank you, Mr. Bachrach. On behalf of all members of this committee, I want to thank our witnesses for generously giving us their time today. With that, this meeting is adjourned. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.